All right. Well, again, I am honored to be here with all of you this evening as we will look to have a robust and engaging conversation in response to Michelle Alexander's powerful, transformative article, Only Revolutionary Love Can Save Us Now, that was published earlier this year. And I'm especially glad, based upon the fact that I had the opportunity to not only meet the Johnsons and Michelle, meet them at American Baptist College. And that institution obviously served as an incubator for justice and advocacy. And I had the unique privilege of meeting multiple people, C.T. Vivian, John Lewis, Diane Nash, and others who have been freedom fighters and agitators for justice. And of course, that place attracts the individuals like our speakers, our conversation partners for tonight, in the form of Michelle Alexander and the Johnsons. So we look forward to what they will share with us as we continue to reflect on this current moment that we're in, but also as we continue to think about the tools of the Spirit and the hope that is still present in this moment in light of everything that is taking place. So would like to start, of course, just asking you, Michelle, familiar with your work, have followed your work over the years. First time I heard you was at the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference. That's the first time I was made aware of the new Jim Crow at that time. And then, of course, participated with churches and others with the study guide that the Proctor produced, based upon us having that conversation about incarceration that, again, it impacted many of us in the Black community, but was not being talked about in the Black church. And so it was a breath of fresh air, of course, to just read your words again. And you then foregrounding not just this notion of love, but revolutionary love. So would you just start off by telling us what the article, of course, lends itself to what prompted you to write it, but I'm kind of interested in you defining that notion of revolutionary love and why you chose that term, if you would.
Well, thank you. It is really wonderful to be here with you, as well as with Joyce and Nelson, who I have such deep admiration for. That article in The Nation was based on a series of speeches that I gave in honor of MLK Day back in January of this year. And like many people, I was feeling enormous angst about what this year, 2024, may hold for us. As the year began, things were not looking good for us, to say the least. A genocide was underway, is still underway in Gaza, and yet the mainstream news was failing to report the daily horrors that were filling my social media feed. A genocide was happening with the support of our government and our tax dollars. At the same time, climate chaos was clearly knocking on our door. 2023 was the hottest year on record, and yet oil companies were still raking in record profits, and our government was refusing to commit to the scale of change that's really necessary if we are going to have any hope of saving humanity. I had just been to a technology conference where there were tech bros admitting that AI might well destroy humanity if climate change doesn't. And on top of all that, Donald Trump was running for president again, and people all over the world were wondering aloud if our democracy was on the verge of collapse. And add to all this is the fact that police killings were making new records, but not making the news. Police killings have been on the rise since the George Floyd uprisings, along with the funding of police in new cop cities. So as this year began, I just really found myself wrestling with anger, despair, frustration. And then I did something that helped to shift my perspective, that jolted me back to life. And I pulled out a copy of King's speech condemning the Vietnam War, the speech he delivered at Riverside Church. And I was reminded of what's at stake and what's necessary now. And although he does not call it revolutionary love in the speech, I think that's what he was talking about when he argued that the United States is the greatest purveyor of violence in the world, and that only a revolution of values has any hope of saving us, not just building power or developing better strategies, but a revolution of values. His famous quote, is we must rapidly shift from, being a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society, when machines and computers and profit motives and property rights become more important than people. The giant triplets of racism, extreme materialism, and militarism are incapable of being conquered. And reading those words again was just a reminder. In fact, the whole speech, I really recommend anyone who has not taken the time to read that whole speech, actually do so. Because in it, he really challenges us to remember that we have more creativity and more power and more genius than we often imagine. But it's only if we are in radical solidarity with one another, if we pledge ourselves to radical solidarity, a worldwide fellowship that lifts neighborly concern above tribe, race, class, nation, an unconditional love for humanity, not just in words, but in deeds, not some kind of sentimental love or romantic love or an abstract notion of love your neighbor, not one that's just convenient or politically profitable or good for our careers, but the kind of love that is rooted in courage and that is clear-eyed and understands the necessity of changing it all, right? And I think that's why, for me, the term revolutionary love has resonance and power, because it's calling us not just to like a touchy-feely love, not an abstract one, but a one that is rooted in an awareness of the dignity and humanity of each and every one of us, no matter who we are, where we've come from, or what we may have done. And a revolutionary love is calling us to act upon that love and to have the courage to take risks, to make sacrifices with the goal of not just tinkering with our systems or with the status quo, but understanding that our economic system, our political system, our militarism, systems of white supremacy, all have to go. But there's no hope for meaningful, lasting change unless we do it with love. And that helped to bring me back to life. And I think reconnect me to the why of this work for me, and also to, remember and to honor those who have come before, as well as all those who are doing this work now and have been doing it for decades, like Joyce and Nelson. And it's really their resilience and their persistence and their, unyielding determination to build beloved community, no matter what, that I think is our only hope.
Mm.
kind of work and the path that they've chosen is our only hope if we are to rise to the challenges of our time. So I am eager to hear from Joyce and Nelson about what revolutionary love means to them and what led them to choose this path, what in their own lives has made them so determined and so committed and has helped them remain so resilient. So I don't know, Joyce or Nelson, you want to jump in?
Yeah, well, thank you, Michelle and Damien. I've been wondering what I might say as well, so we'll both be surprised. Um, but we probably would name revolutionary love as beloved community itself. I was so pleased when I first recall hearing that term revolutionary love was from younger brothers and sisters, siblings from Black Lives Matter, and just the energetic gatherings when there was discussion of revolutionary love, and then we'd be asked then. And I love the term. I think it is more up to date terminology, but yet beloved community is a lasting one. And I'm sure that most people who are hearing us, seeing us, will relate that to Dr. King and the movement of the 20th century, which is what we grow out of. We, as younger people, much younger, we're 77 and 81 right now. And Nelson raised his hand. And I started out at about 15, I think, and probably Nelson was about the same age, though he's 4 years older. And have been blessed to continue. And Michelle, the question is always to us, what sustains you in this beloved community itself? I, as a young person in Richmond, Virginia, from First Baptist Church, hearing the stories about the children of Israel and fighting for freedom and whatever, that was speaking to me in Sunday school and in church. And it was just a period, it's a season, just like the season is now. I won't say just like, but similar to the season we're in now. And I felt called to that work. So it was the marching to City Hall for voting rights, open accommodations fight, you know, to be able to sit at the lunch counters, and had no idea I would end up living in Greensboro, where the A&T 4 came out of, and then become personal friends with them. Lewis Brandon's right down the hall. He was one who was not one of the 4, but worked actively with them. And he's a part of the National Council of Elders, as the 2 of us are as well. But revolutionary love says that, first of all, it is a change. It's a change from what love has, how it has been characterized. Love itself has not changed. It is sustaining, it is life-giving, it is healing, nurturing. It brings about possibilities that the human mind can't even always think about. But it can then go into places that seem to be cemented over with harshness and racism and white supremacy and all that, yet seeping through those little places that we can't even see with the human eye, make a tremendous difference. So I love the term revolutionary love that can come out. But as I said, translate for me in my terminology, and we've learned to speak different languages of generations at Beloved Community. There are 4 generations of us who work here every day together. So Beloved Community is a term for me, but I fully embrace my understanding of revolutionary love and look forward to it propelling us to an even higher position of humanity as we move forward. But let me stop at that and invite Nelson to add, or maybe even disagree with whatever I've just shared.
Well, you know, our understanding of anything is to grow or it can diminish. I think as long as you stay in the struggle to try to change the conditions of the world for the better, the more you have to grow or give up. And I think that growth draws the best out of us as we engage a world that is a nation that is disloyal to its own creeds and documents, that blatantly accumulate riches at the expense of the poor, that casually makes war on other countries in order to enrich itself. Living through all of that gives you a different perspective of the nation, first of all, but it also gives you a different perspective of what it takes to change it. And that's where I think the term revolutionary love comes in. It's not a plaything. It's not in the 60s, we would have fun and were somewhat unaware of the danger we were in oftentimes. That's not true anymore. People around you are starving. People are reduced to shooting each other. Folk don't have a place to stay that's warm and comforting. All of that actually are social conditions going in the wrong direction. What does it take to not only confront them, but to change it? It's not a plaything. It's not something where you can give a speech or do a monkey flip or whatever, and it changes. It requires a deep commitment. And I think that's what the revolutionary dimension of it really means. That it requires a growth in us that comes out in a way that affirms life and affirms the neighbor and affirms the next nation, that it doesn't get in line to volunteer to go to Vietnam, but actually it equips you to say no to those things. I'm not going to do that. It violates the very core of love that I've come to understand. To run into another nation and start killing people and giving the land to the rich. And as you grow in that way, if your love doesn't grow, it won't match that. And it gets overshadowed by that. So I think the term revolutionary love is appropriate for this period where we are confronted with climate change, where we're confronted with different forms of racism, where poverty grows in our neighborhood. What is the quality of the soul that can stand against that? And to do it with a certain amount of, I'm reluctant to use the word joy, but with a certain amount of contentment and commitment. This is what I was born to do. I think that is revolutionary love. And I do think that it is a requirement of the period that we were in. And in a sense, King was hitting that pretty hard, but it has gotten worse since they killed King. That it will require a deeper commitment by a greater array of people in order to qualitatively transform this nation. from what it has become to being more of a beloved community.
Mhm. You know, Michelle, there's an element I want to add to this. You hit on a little bit, both of you, and that is that revolutionary love, in my opinion, is characterized by an element of confidence. That doesn't mean that we know everything, that we know the answers, or we have a recipe for solving particular issues or circumstances or whatever. But, you know, King spoke of the direction of the moral arc, and it bends toward justice. So some of us have been able to cling to that, and those of us who may come from a more religious nature to our spirituality, but I feel all of us are spiritual beings. It's a matter how we practice it or understand it. But that confidence that even though there are hardships and horrible things like you were describing, Jen, I thought about you sounding the way King sounded at Riverside Church in '67, where I had forgotten about how much he laid out what was going on in Vietnam. You know, I thought about my friend, another person we have sought to mentor to the degree we could, Dr. William Barber, Bishop Barber. He's another good teacher, saying to the people what's going on in a way that they can hear it. And King had that gift. But anyway, the confidence that even though it's hard now, it's dark and what have you, that is so important for those of us who are gifted with and committed to practicing, believing in revolutionary love, because there are hardships. It would be false to pretend that that's not true. But if there is a confidence in your fellow human beings, a confidence in that spirit that has created us all and sustained us all during the years, that helps us keep going on. And those of us who are older, who have seen some serious hardships, yet are still here. Though we miss our brothers, sisters, our siblings who are not here with us. We lost Bernice Johnson Reagan very recently. One of our mentors, Vincent Harding, his birthday was the other day. I contacted his daughter and his most recent widow, and just folks I knew, just to remember Vincent. I know Vincent was dear to you, Michelle, as well. But knowing that we come from that deep well of as I said, life-giving, sustaining, love-giving, and knowing that from that, if we can do this, what seems so simple yet is so hard, uniting one with another across what seem like differences, but which are very small when we really look at them, that we can do powerful things. That has been the promise over the years, and some of us have continued to walk with that promise and hopefully sharing it with others. And that's where I see what the title of your article in The Nation magazine was something like, what is it? The only hope now is revolutionary love. Yet it is hope. So it's the only, but it's really a strong thing. That's what sustains us. So I thank you so much for having written that article. And I hope that many others who have not gone through some things that we've gone through will draw from that well that you put forth, because that's what the world needs more now, is hope. While we're just scared and crunched down and fearful of one another, hate one another, whatever, we can't come to our fullest potential. But when we still have that hope and sow it into our children, into our neighbors, other people, that's where the possibility comes, in my opinion.
So I have a question for you two. I'm curious about, given your experience over the years, what you've changed your mind about, if anything, regarding kind of what revolutionary love requires. And I'm wondering this in part because I know that, you know, Nelson, you mentioned that this path requires growth. It's a path of personal growth, but it's also about collective growth, what it means for a people to grow, but it also requires personal growth and a commitment to that. And Joyce, I hear you talking about the need to have that kind of anchor within you that can be the source of resilience and hope and knowing that the struggle is worth it in the end, no matter what the outcome might be within your lifetime. That there's, and so I'm curious. I know that for myself, when I was younger, I really viewed my engagement in social justice work and civil rights work and movement work, such as it was, is really about power and trying to win individual battles strategically by building power, sustaining power. And that frame of mind worked well for me as a civil rights lawyer for many years. It worked well when I was involved in organizing and media advocacy to a point. And then a time came when I began to doubt whether we can ever win through power struggles and movement building alone unless we have a major kind of shift in consciousness, some kind of awakening to the dignity and humanity of one another. And I have been reading this book, Morningside, which is about the Greensboro Massacre in 1979 and the struggle in Greensboro, which the two of you are very much a part of, to get something like justice in response to that massacre, but also to build beloved community more broadly in Greensboro. And I was so struck reading the portrayals of the two of you in your youth and wondering, wow, like how much of the ways that they were thinking and approaching movement work then is similar to or different than it is now. And on the one hand, it is just so obvious, practically on every page, how fiercely committed, deeply committed both of you were. And the movement that you were part of was to doing justice, confronting the Klan courageously, and challenging the powers that be. And I'm really curious to hear whether you've changed your mind about anything in terms of your approach, or not. And like, what are the lessons learned, I guess, about the path of revolutionary love and what it takes that you think you may have acquired over these decades? I was just fascinated and inspired to read the story.
I'm gonna let the preacher go first.
Amen.
I think
life itself is a journey, and that there's a growth process that you tend to get stronger or weaker as you face the world. A lot of that is related to how you understand yourself, how you understand your neighbor, and how you understand the world itself. And in a sense, I have always felt a certain hope, certain possibility, but it was never alone. It was always over against not that hope and not that possibility. So that's the tension that you live in. And once you accept that, it's an anchor in and of itself. In one of those chapters, that you haven't gotten to yet. That I confronted the people who killed my best friend,
Mm.
and I did it on their terms. I went to them in a rural area about 50 miles from here, and I got frightened about halfway there. And I pulled over to the side of the road. It was springtime, and I looked at the blooming trees, and I don't know what it was about them that gave me strength.
Hope.
That the winter was over and spring was coming.
Mm.
So I pressed ahead, and we had a confrontation in the sense that I was led into a room where a guy had a pistol on me at the whole time I was there, trying to have a discussion about why they should not come back to Greensboro. The longer I was there, the more comfortable I got, in the sense that I was having a conversation with another human being.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I was getting through to that human being and felt it. Because when I asked him, why are you coming back to Greensboro after you killed people like that? And he said, the Grand Dragon said, because y'all are raping our women. I said, listen to me, Carol. Look at the rainbow of Black people who are out here. You think all that came from Black men raping women? You know better than that. And I just pushed him on it. Said, you know better than that. And then he said that we were taking their jobs. And I was telling them the mills are going to Korea and to Mexico. There ain't no Black people down there taking no jobs. This is a whole international thing. And y'all are being misled into fighting the wrong people. Actually, I got him to listen for a minute or two. It didn't last too long, but I thought I was having a conversation with another human being. And so all of that's to say, we have the capacity to touch each other on a human level. At least we have that potentiality. And when you can do that, I think you should. And when you can't do it, you pray for somebody else to do it.
Mm-hmm.
You don't give up on the human species.
Did you always have that confidence?
Pardon?
Did you always have that faith, that confidence that you?
I think I had a corner of it.
Mm-hmm.
My grandfather was a slave in Louisiana, and my mother never tired of telling stories about my grandfather. And she named me after my grandfather. Mm-hmm. And in some sense, I carry that within me. But to answer your question, no, I've not always had that. But I've always had the potential to grow it. Mm-hmm. And I think most of us do. Mm-hmm. Most of us have the potential to grow it if we choose to do that. Mm-hmm. If that seemed like a path to us, for me, it did. I was trying to stop 100 Klansmen from marching in Greensboro, where I knew the opposition, who were my friends, would clash with them. And God only knows what would happen. So I felt that I was the only person in position to do what I did, as far as I know. Mm-hmm. Nobody called me up and said, I'll do this. And I did it without consulting with anybody except Joyce. But anyway, that's a long story about pushing through the hardships on the one hand, and just the misinformation on the other, and the disbelief that human beings can change. I think they can. I think it's all about what are the conditions conducive to that change, and whether at a particular moment in time you can step into those conditions. And if that moment in time does not present itself, I wouldn't step into it, but it did present itself. If these folk had not been planning to come to Greensboro and march down Main Street, I would never have tried to meet with them. But these things converged, and I felt I had no choice because other lives were on the line. It wasn't just about me. Let me stop there. Otherwise, I might not.
So I would respond to that with two aspects, Michelle. One thing that I have come to recognize, which as a younger person, I never thought I would probably concede, is that some things take time. I can recall as a younger person when people who were seniors would say, you know, I'm from Richmond, Virginia, so it'd be like, Al, you're trying to just go too fast, you know. And it would be, in my mind, something needs to go faster because we have been subjected to discrimination, all the type of things that were going on in our lives for too long. And we had this thing at that point of people over 30 couldn't be trusted because they had gotten just engulfed by the system and conceded everything. You know, talking back in that 77 and 81 it's a joke, but that's what we thought. And you might have heard the story before that when I went off to school, went to Duke University, one of the earlier Black students, in 1964. I was 17 years old. I honestly thought that just in a few years, I had a whole plan that I and others who believed like I did about, you know, justice and fairness, equality, civil rights, all the terms, humanity, that we would have put an end to racism. We just had to work hard at it. Mm-hmm. And it would be done with. And we would, you know, educate people. People just didn't understand that we really were ordained equal by God and this type of thing. I didn't understand systems then. I didn't understand culture and its ongoing role. Just a whole lot of things. I know we don't have time to go through it all, but I really believe that. So the timeline has changed, because it didn't happen in the few years. I thought all this would happen. I think I gave myself about 8 years. I'd be 25. I would be finishing up medical school. And then I would get married, have 2 kids, and earn $12,000 a year before 30. That was my plan. And, you know, but we would have changed this world. Talk about revolution. That was mine.
You married the wrong guy to get $30,000.
It was 12, wasn't even 30. You know? But you know, so but we need that youthful zeal. And I don't put down young folk who seem to be thinking impossible, because impossible is what's needed, or what we think is the impossible. But there's nothing, you know, too hard for God. And they're just, as I said, the potential of human beings. So time is one thing. But I still would say it's about the moment. And I think the time is right now for some significant changes. And we all feel it. You were saying you're feeling the dread on the one hand, but then you see the possibility. Mm-hmm. We've been going around this state building something up called the Long March for Unity and Justice, built on some of what Gandhi did and just the whole history of the children of Israel, going all the way back to that. Coming together. North Carolina is very diverse. That's why it's a purple state. From the mountains of Color Week is where we're going to start, on over to Wilmington. Nelson came up with this idea, I'm calling it a vision, because he was sick in the hospital at that time. My daughter's now worried about his health. He's talking to us about this long march. And we're like, we got to get you out of this hospital first. But, you know, while we were looking at vital signs, I guess he was looking at the signs of the time. And it's taken on. And we're getting people from all over North Carolina who are joining in with this. And we, it it'll be connected to voting, but it's more than that. It's more about the people getting together. But it takes time to build those relationships, but that hope is being intertwined in there all the while. My second point I've lost in my mind. But anyway, we'll stick with just the timing. Oh, I know the other point. My understanding of who or for whom, with whom, on whose behalf I'm working expanded. As a little first colored, then Negro, then Black, then Afro-American, then African-American. Now I'm just seeing myself as King said, as I was listening last night again, citizen of the world. That all means all. It means, as we say in North Carolina, everybody. So that's been growth. So certainly as a Black female, there are some particularities that I will feel, some affinities to other people who are Black women. But it really is seeing my neighbor being everybody, and fighting on behalf of whatever ways, and knowing that what I might do in Greensboro can make a positive change somewhere else. We were privileged to understand that more deeply as we built ties with people like the Archbishop Tutu, Peter Story, who's still alive. We meet with him about once every couple of weeks by phone from South Africa. Building those ties of unity and knowing that there are people all over the world seeking to build beloved community, revolutionary love in thousands of different kinds of ways. But it's all being sown into the universe. So the moral arc really does bend that way. But we've got to claim that truth as opposed to relying on those lies that it's horrible and there's not enough and we got to get rid of immigrants who are taking away jobs, all the lies that are being told out here, and realize the truth that we're all connected. So my sense of all and everybody, my people, has really expanded. And I think as you reach out and touch that humanity, then people like our grandson are teaching us even more how we are linked. And our Native brothers and sisters have taught us this too, linked to the earth that sustains us and the wind and all that. So we are trying to care more for that. He hardly lets Papa cut limbs on the tree. It's like, you don't want nobody cutting your arm, do you, Papa? You know, so it's just this sense that all is life. And many of our children are learning that, and I think will be more and more respectful of this thing called life and grow it into all the possibilities. So those be two things. Timing, as I said, there are spurts. I think we're about to get into a spurt right now, but we got to be prepared and understand what hope that really affords us. Is not just for me to get a bigger house or something. It's about humanity and that love growing. That's how these moments come, and then telling the story so that we don't fall backwards during harder, harsher times.
And just could I just add, on this long march, the idea is that we want to facilitate people walking toward each other.
Yes.
From the mountains in Colorado to Asheville to the various towns. And what we said, if you keep walking toward each other and affirming each other on the walk, you're building a movement. You're building a connective tissue between the various beautiful pieces of the diversity of humanity, which is what you're trying to get people to see. And so that was at the base of what we were doing. So we're winding through the whole state. And then I hadn't reached out to you yet, but I heard you preach.
Baby, yes.
At the Haley Farm.
Children's Defense Fund, yes.
So I'm reaching out to you, Doc.
Yes, sir.
When we get to the ocean, we need a word.
Yeah, I'm curious, given the years of experience that you've had and what you've described as kind of the growth you've personally experienced and that you've now described as kind of happening within the movements. I love this metaphor of marching towards each other rather than just like marching towards a destination. This idea of marching towards one another is like
Well, just against somebody. It's really toward each other.
yes,
Yes.
yeah, yes. Like, do you see clear similarities or differences between kind of the movement, decades ago in the 60s and 70s and maybe even into the 80s and the anti-apartheid struggle and what you see happening today? And I guess I'm thinking in particular about what I often hear in spaces, which is a bit of resistance or even intolerance to kind of a nonviolence message of, as though we've outgrown the need for a nonviolent approach to movement work, and that perhaps the nonviolent frame is, an expression of like the politics of respectability or not realistic about the limits of what's possible when your opponent has all the power and all the arms and the bombs and the guns. And I'm just curious, like how much of this feels similar and familiar to the kinds of debates that were going on decades ago, and like what are the differences do you experience in this moment, both in terms of what's happening in the world and what's happening in our movements?
Mm-hmm. The first thing that jumps out at me is the format in which these debates occur, like on the electronic media, some of which I use, some of which I don't. As I said, we are multi-generational here, so I'm assisted by others. But the rapidity in which we come to conclusions about one another, because things do go around the world, 5 or 6 times you say something and then you're, what's the term, canceled? Well, some of our work in the 60s, it was really word of mouth and from the pulpits and the barbershop stools and whatever, mimeograph machine, things just went slow on that level. But I think they went deeper, because now just terms or what have you, people think they know everything. So I've said oftentimes, we have so much information, but we have so little understanding and knowledge. So that's one difference. There's still the debates, and that debate about violence, nonviolence is not a new one. If you just look, even use some of the biblical reports, that's always been going. And the thing is, we often diminish the power of love.
Mm-hmm.
Love is creative, can not just change things, but can make newness out of old things. There was a woman in, I think it was Detroit. We were visiting Grace Lee Boggs and then Bill Wiley Kellerman across town or whatever. And name was Charity. I cannot think of her first name then. Might have been really Flint. But she came to a session we had, and she thanked us so much for making clear the power of love. She was one of the women who fought back against the whole water crisis. And you remember that. It was just a few years ago when people were basically being poisoned, having to take baths almost out of bottled water that they couldn't even afford, and water turned off and what have you. But she was one of those souls who stood up. I think was just a whole low-income projects, we probably would call it, of women trying to sustain themselves there. Ended up being jailed for it. And so she said, well, thank you, Reverend and Sister Johnson. She said, so you are talking about waging love. We said, yes. that's it. You know, it's really that radical, that revolutionary love. Unfortunately, I think less than a week after we returned home, Charity was hit by a car and killed. Were you there during that time, Michelle? Were we there together? Because there was just a lot of going on. We
I don't
would
think
go
so.
to,
I don't think that was the same.
yeah, we went
I
to
don't know if that
Detroit.
we were at the Bog Center together,
Yeah,
but I don't remember. Maybe
Yeah.
I just didn't.
you would have been there. You would remember this woman. But we would go to Detroit about every April, sort of commemorating Dr. King and all of what King taught us and what have you. We've met this woman at Bill Wiley Kellerman's church.
You
But-
will remember Grace Boggs.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, Grace tried to get me to criticize you.
Yeah, so I heard.
Grace loved her good argument.
Yes.
I said, Grace, I'm not going to do it.
Grace even had tried to get us to tell Bishop Tutu what he was doing wrong. We said, that's on you. We're not doing that. You know, we don't even agree but with what you said. But anyway, the point is that Charity said this idea that there was strength in what she was doing. She was getting water and food and other stuff. It was acts of love. We were able to help her, and then people around her see that that was more powerful than what the folk who were cutting off the water and the resources to them would do. And she termed it waging love. That's stuff. I mean, I think I've seen this somewhere else. I don't know whether she's the first one using it or what, but it was Charity who shared it with us, and her name was so profound on its own.
Let me pivot off of that. I think we have a misreading of the power of love. In the sense that it sounds like a foggy, weak, not too powerful thing. But when it is anchored at the very depth of our being, there isn't anything more powerful. Even killing you gives it more power. You know, so in a sense, how we read and understand love, I think is critical, because somebody can stand up and say, boo, and everybody run away, you know, because that's how they understand and fear, not love. So I think that this march from the mountain to the sea, which we bought from Gandhi, is an opportunity for town by town to actually get a delegation. And we're going to the city where the only elected government in the United States was violently overthrown by white supremacy mob. And we want to lift up that truth and say no more. It's not going to happen anymore. That's related to putting right people in office. It's related to accountability. What is the value of putting somebody in office and somebody else is in their ear? All of that is an opportunity to teach as we walk from city to city to city. That was the idea. And in some sense, to use it as an occasion to not only walk toward each other, but to work with each other, believe with each other, build something with each other, hold commitments that will endure beyond the election with each other. And we think that that's the greatest contribution that we can make as an act of love. We're not looking to fight nobody because we don't want to be messed with ourselves. So we got security. But we want a powerful, peaceful march where people from different cities join at different places and we converge in Wilmington.
Yeah, and this is the we're talking about is North Carolina organizations that well, mainly nonprofits, but neighborhood groups and all that. Some of the names you would recognize. I think there are about 40 or so officially signed on as being sponsors of this, initiated by Beloved Community Center. But then, as Nelson said, we've been to 13 places, or folks are in Durham or somewhere as I speak, talking to folks in the neighborhoods about this. And the enthusiasm is high. You know, it predated the election kind of things that have come up, and people have said, I've been waiting for this. When I say people, I'm talking about people from rural areas, people who are white, who are Native, who are Latino, men, women, LGBTQIA plus, I mean, young folk, old folk, who want to get together and see how they can make a difference. And our thing is, yes, vote your conscience. We're nonpartisan. But depend on your neighbors, on yourselves. It is we, the people, who are going to make the change. And unless we have we, the people, it won't really happen. So we think at our age, Beloved has been around for a while. We have some young leadership coming in that we hope will continue the legacy, but more than the legacy, the work. But we think that's our biggest contribution, is to share our experiences, that love for them, that confidence in young folk, that young folk will do it differently, but do it as it needs to be done. And this is a symbolic way of showing that people need to see love in action too, not just you talking about it.
Damon, do we have a few minutes?
Yeah, I just wanted to interject in light of what you all just shared, because part of what I'm thinking here is you all have shared so richly. Michelle, I just wanted to know, given what the Johnsons have shared in terms of timing and growth and the changes that they've made, or just the nurturing of love, I'd be interested if you could just briefly share how have things evolved for you since the coming out of the new Jim Crow. Obviously, you spending time at Union Theological Seminary, because it seems as though over time, right, as you mentioned earlier, what you thought about in terms of power at one point, but then it seems as though your language has continued to be rooted in spirit language, faith language, a deepening of morality. So I'd just be interested, before we get out of here, just for you to share just a little bit of your own continued evolution since the book came out, in terms of, and then where you are now.
Damon, you read my mind. That's exactly what I wanted to ask.
Oh yeah, see, we all look right. We on the same team.
That's right.
Well, you know, the most honest thing I can say is that it was through meeting Vincent Harding and the people he introduced me to, including Joyce and Nelson and Grace Lee Boggs and other elders who had been in this work for a long time and who are willing to share very generously with me some of their wisdom, their insight, their experience, that helped to awaken and kindle within me an awareness, not only that more is at stake in our justice movements that often appears kind of on the surface of things, but that some part of me had always known that to be true. And, you know, that's part of, I guess, why I was asking Joyce and Johnson about their own growth and whether kind of that part of them that was committed to this path of revolutionary love always existed or was new. And it was interesting because what I heard them just say is that, yes, it always existed and it's been new and evolving. And I think that was true for me too. You know, after my book kind of blew up, I mean, it took a couple of years actually for it to catch fire, gain momentum. I spent many, many months traveling around speaking to tiny groups of activists and half empty church basements and trying to get folks to listen, because these were the early Obama years. We had just elected our first Black president, and the nation was awash in post-racialism, and we have overcome, and, we have a long way to go, but we're on the right path, And so it took a minute for the message to begin to break through. But then once it did, I had such a strange experience where suddenly, instead of just handfuls of people in the audience, there were hundreds, and people were applauding, and I was calling for movement building and calling out the system and describing it and receiving a lot of positive feedback and a sense of resonance. And yet, at this moment when I should have been sort of overjoyed that the message was finally breaking through, I was feeling tremendous despair and this kind of empty feeling like maybe nothing's really ever going to change. And it was such a strange feeling. This sort of empty, all sound and fury and signify nothing was the voice I kind of kept hearing within me. And when Vincent Harding invited me to come speak at the Isle School of Theology, I gave my new Jim Crow speech and got the applause and walked off the stage with this empty feeling in my heart. And Vincent pulled me aside and sat me down and said, as he would, in his deep, slow voice, "Thank you, Sister Niece Michelle, for your work, for your research." He said, "But I think there's a deeper message here that you're struggling to articulate and maybe even claim for yourself." And he said, "I think that deeper message is what Jesus was trying to say, which is what you do unto the least of these, my brethren, you do unto me." He's like, that is the message. That's what this is all about. It's not just about the power and the politics and the laws and the policies. It's about the dignity and divinity within each and every one of us. That's the message. That's what this is about. And, something just really shifted in me hearing the message. And I will say, I am not a Christian. I did not grow up in the church. I have not had a faith community in my life. And yet I experienced those words as the truth. And that really is what began a journey with Vincent, that where he would have long phone conversations with me, and he gave me the book Jesus and the Disinherited, and began connecting me to people that he had labored with over the years who understood that there was a deeper dimension to this work, and we're moving from that place. And after Vincent died, I kind of reached a point where I realized there was another path for me that I was wanting to explore for myself. And that's where I am on my journey. I am exploring and learning and trying to grow so that, I can really honor this path, the path of building beloved community, the path of revolutionary love, and move out of that place that I had been in, of imagining that there are winners and losers, and that the goal is to build enough power and have the right strategies so that some of us will win. So.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll say thank you thank you so much for sharing that, because I often wonder when we talk about now the change in values, what you mentioned, which I think the Johnsons have also shared, you were open to that awakening, because I think people can experience a truth and be awakened, but what it may mean in terms of the unknown and what parts of myself that I may have to give up in the exploration of that. Right? People can kind of recoil against that. So I think all of us are glad that you had the openness and the courage to follow that path and continue to use your unique gifts and skills to continue to articulate, right, and broaden the lens, because I think the language is oftentimes affected by the lens people have. And so what you've been able to do is broaden the lens and now bring together in a very Christ-like way in understanding the law, but also understanding the spirit that's beyond the law, and then the spirit of the law, right? Be moving beyond the letter of the law into the spirit of the law. And I think we all are beneficiaries of the ways in which you responded to Vincent and that invitation for beloved community. And we are so glad that the Johnsons still remain steadfast and unmovable and abounding in that work to this day. So it's been a privilege and a pleasure just to hear the reflection and the intentionality to engage in resistance and courage up to this point. So I guess that's maybe a closing. I know we've been here for a while. If everyone could just maybe offer to those who are listening and joining, who are at various stages and ages as it pertains to maybe being in movements or understanding this unique time that we're in and about to get involved in movement building. Just what are some of the things that you all would want to share in closing as it pertains to helping folks to continue to remain resilient and remain hopeful in light of the possibilities of this time, but also in light of possible impending peril in certain ways?
Mm. Well, something that's been stirred inside of me is Michelle spoke about a mutual mentor, Vincent G. Harding, and Michelle's young enough to be our daughter. Our daughters are the same basic age as she. And Vincent probably was close to, at least maybe close to being old enough to be our father, but he certainly acted that way. And he loved music. I love it as well. And I would just urge those who are listening to find you a couple of songs.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't mention that when Michelle asked what helps sustain me. And as I've learned to hum or sing, sometimes I just break out singing, and Vincent would laugh. He's like, Joyce, that just little shaky voice. Well, I'm not a singer, but I said I sing. And find your song. So I remember when our friends were killed November 3rd, my best friend was one of those killed, Sandy Lee Neely Smith, a Bennett College graduate, and 4 other fine people thought my husband had been killed. He was jailed. I was riding around town still trying to organize and look after people and what have you. And I sang one of the songs from the Harambe singers who became Sweet Honey in the Rock, Bernice Johnson Reagan and those. We remember them back in the day when they were running childcare in Atlanta. And it was another man that then died. But we've got to carry on. So I'll just sing that to myself to soothe myself and know that I've got to be strong, yet I need to give space for the tears and all of that to go. And then there's a song from Vincent where he rewrote the words to We Are Climbing Jacob's Ladder. And we teach it to young people come through here. And just the other day when we had young people from HBCUs and this labor union, SEIU, all crunched into the church space, learning the stories and what have encouraging them. These young interns have jazzed that song up. So I had to get them to record it. Vincent wouldn't recognize, but he'd like it. But it's we are building up a new world. Builders must be strong. Courage, sisters. Courage, brothers. Courage, siblings. Builders must be strong. Then rise and shine and give God the glory, though the way be long. So I leave you with that. Find you a song you can sing. You don't have to go to church. You don't have to go to the mosque. You don't have to go to the synagogue in the gathering, but you can find that song that's inside of you that you are spreading out in the world to sustain yourself.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, let me say, that I very much appreciate this discussion. It was inspiring, insightful, and very helpful. You know, another song we used to sing is that we've come a long way, but we have a long, long way to go. And I think that if we think in terms of the contribution that we have made and can make, our soul is satisfied because we can pass the baton and believe that it will contribute to the human race becoming more fully what it is intended to be. And if that can get, how can I say, sewn into our hearts, what else is life about? Yeah, that is the beautiful piece, that we then become a part of eternity.
That's beautiful. Michelle, would you give us the last word? Thank you all.
Yeah, I'm so moved by what you both just shared. And Joyce, what you shared about music and song reminded me that several years ago, I joined a choir called the Harmony Project in Columbus, Ohio, even though I cannot sing to save my life. This is a choir that is made up of more than 100 people. I think it was over 200 people at some point, and it was a community choir that was come as you are. You don't have to know how to sing. And people of all walks of life and backgrounds, people who just out of prison, who were in recovery, people who were, professionals, people who were considered leaders in the community, young people, people of all ages, races, coming together. Most of us could not really carry a tune on our own. And somehow together we were able to sing and find harmony and do a big performance for the community, singing really inspirational songs about what we can be and do together. And that experience of singing with others who could not sing, and yet somehow together we could find harmony, was just one of the most beautiful, transformative experiences that I've had. And so, yeah, being reminded of the importance of song and singing together. And yeah, I appreciate that. I guess I will also just say that something that has been so helpful to me in sustaining has been the work of Howard Thurman. I mentioned that, Vincent Harding had introduced me to Howard Thurman's book, Jesus and the Disinherited. But I really not only did that book move me profoundly and have helped me to have a completely different understanding and relationship to what Christianity might be, but I really loved that Howard Thurman was so deeply committed to this idea that we need to figure out what would make us come alive. That the goal wasn't just to be in the struggle, but was to actually come fully alive as human beings. And that to come fully alive required honesty, and it required courage, and it required tremendous compassion for ourselves and others. and that really this kind of work for justice for others provides this extraordinary opportunity, not just to serve or to struggle, but to come fully alive and discover what it means to be fully human. And so, yeah, I would say that that is something that I hope that we put more at the center of our movement work, our practices, whether it's song or celebrations, or being in nature and swimming in the waves, whatever it is that helps to reconnect us through dance, movement, to the joy and the miracle of life together. So anyway, I guess that's where I'll leave it.
Well, thank you all. And that's a whole nother, that's almost like a whole nother webinar just to have a conversation on Thurman, or really just to do it on Jesus and the Disinherited, because I think that Thurman, when we're looking at where we are now, the language about fear, hate, and deception and love in Jesus and the Disinherited is so poignant for where we are now. And Thurman has helped me continue to try to live my outer life from the inner sanctuary in ways that are significant and transformative. And so it is a real gift to share with those who really seek to embody beloved community and really have come alive from revolutionary love. And I'll leave with this. One of the things that Otis Moss Jr. says in reference to Psalm 23 and the whole notion of the Lord preparing a table in the presence of my enemies, one thing that Otis Moss suggests is that sometimes you can become so focused on the enemy that you're not spending any time considering the table. And so today has been us at a virtual table, and at the table, there's exchange. At the table, there is equity in terms of how we can see each other eye to eye. At the table, there is reflection. At the table, there's laughter. And ultimately, what you all have, I think, provided is in the midst of everything that's going on at the table, there can be an exchange of joy, an exchange of peace, and an exchange of love. So thank you all so much for the ways in which you all continue to live your outer life from the inner sanctuary in ways that continue to call us up, call us out, and call us into new possibilities to experience revolutionary love and seek to try to be those who work to build the beloved community. So thank you for your example. Thank you for your work. Thank you for your witness. And thank you for your willingness to share with us on this evening. And we look forward to possibly another opportunity to hear from you all at some point. But thank you again.
You're welcome.
Mutual, and thank you.
Come join us on the Long March, September 20 through 29.
All right. Sure will.
All right.